Hi, a film I've heard a great deal about over the last few months that I finally got round to watching, having saved it up to watch over my Christmas break, was The Vast of Night, the new film by Andrew Patterson, a commercials director who has made his jump to cinema with this film for Amazon. It was shown at a number of film festivals in 2019, finally picked up for distribution earlier in 2020, and due to circumstances beyond their control, wound up being released straight to streaming services. It's a very simple story. It's set over the course of a single night, almost in real time, in a small town in the southwestern United States in the late 1950s. The local basketball game is attracting most of the town's inhabitants, leaving a few people dotted out here and there to carry on various jobs. There's the young man who is hosting the Friday night show at the radio station, and the teenager who's manning the telephone exchange. But both of them separately hear strange interference on the line, and as they try to investigate, they start piecing more and more elements of the puzzle together and come to the conclusion that the town is about to come under attack from extraterrestrial beings. Um, the film, I think, is a profoundly cynical piece of work. Not because of the film itself, which is fine, but it's only fine. It's very Twilight Zone wrote by number story, and it's even presented in context as an installment in an old fashioned anthology series called Paradox Theatre. And it keeps flipping back to this sort of old fashioned style of grainy picture and a square aspect ratio, something which seems to purely be a visual gimmick with no real context to it. The film has no real theme or uh, anything intellectual behind it. The characters are very bland sketches. There's very little emotional engagement. And the dialogue is, in a lot of the cases, very poorly written. The first 10 minutes are extremely dense with dialogue, with characters talking almost continuously in very fast monotone about tape recorders, about uh, new innovations in technology, none of which have any real bearing to the rest of the movie. Um, but the cynical nature of the film, I think, is defined by the fact that it's a calling card for the filmmaker. It was made on a budget of $700,000 in about 3 weeks, um, with a small amount of visual effects. But it seems to exist purely as a calling card for the director's future work. This is a CV to demonstrate that he's capable of producing something on a tight budget to a reasonable technical level in the hope of gaining more expensive, more widely seen big budget work within the next few years. Um, and as a result, it seems to have worked because it's generally had quite good reviews, even though I found it quite bland and uninteresting. What I found particularly odd was that Patterson himself isn't actually credited. It's possible that I missed it, that I was looking away from the screen because I was watching it on a computer, or that I simply didn't catch it at the time. But there is no actual directing credit on this film, and Patterson's work as writer and producer are for some reason under the pseudonym of James Montague, perhaps a uh, reference to M.R. James, Montague Rhodes James, the great English ghost story writer, to which tonally The Vast of Night bears some resemblance. Um, but it seems that this film exists solely to advance his own career. There are very few actors in it of note. There are very few actors in it who have more than a scene or so each. There are long stretches where there is just exposition being delivered from one character to another, and scenes that are shot in a very flat, boring way. The color correction seems off in some scenes, so that scenes that should be very dark and dim seem too light, as though the contrast has been faded up, or there's a slight green tint to the image, and it doesn't look as though it's deliberate. It looks like it's just shoddy. So, as a calling card goes, it doesn't seem to work because he's not taking credit for it, and it's not even that good. It's a passable piece of work. It's moderately professional, and the acting is fair. Um, there are a number of sequences that are very obvious uh, flares of showmanship, or showing off what he can do as a director. There's a sequence which is around 9 minutes held on a single shot of the telephone operator as she speaks to various people over the phone, slowly realizing that there's something strange going on. And then shortly afterwards, a sequence that tracks through the entire town from the telephone exchange to the school gym, through the basketball game, out of the window, and around the back of the building to the radio station, which exists for no reason other than to show off the director's virtuosity with the camera. Particularly since in the opening sequence we've already had the journey from the basketball court through to the telephone exchange as the characters walk there. The director seems to have taken great pains to research period detail to the effort of actually sanding and remarking the basketball court in order to fit with um, the layout of the late 1950s. But for all his technical virtuosity, there do seem to be some odd lapses. And he's not a good scriptwriter because the script is bad. It's boring, it's generic, the characters are flat. There are long scenes of exposition with little to mitigate them in terms of um, visual inventiveness. And the result is something that is really should be consigned to the bargain bin. It's not a good film, and it's not really a good calling card. So, although other critics seem very excited by Andrew Patterson, I couldn't really care less what he does next.